All right, let's talk about the World Economic Forum in Davos, but not the one you're used to hearing about, with the usual handshakes and speeches. No, we're going to look at the 2026 summit as a massive stress test, a moment when all the hidden cracks in our global system suddenly burst into the open. So, let's get into it.
First things first, we need to set the scene, because to really get what happened, you have to understand just how strange this particular meeting was. This was supposed to be the annual gathering of the world's most powerful people, but honestly, it felt more like the opening scene of a political thriller.
You know, for decades, Davos has been this ritual, a performance of total confidence and control. But this year, something was just off. The official theme was, ironically, a spirit of dialogue. But behind the scenes, the real atmosphere was tense, it was chaotic, and you could feel this deep anxiety in the air. The big question is, why?
And then this happened. This was the first major shockwave. Now, this wasn't some nuanced policy debate. This was the leader of the United States making a demand of a NATO ally that was just completely unprecedented, especially on the world's biggest stage. You could almost feel the ground shaking under everyone's feet.
This is where the gap between the official show and the reality behind the curtain just became so obvious. We're talking about CEOs in expensive suits literally sprinting and shoving each other to get into a speech. The president of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, just gets up and walks out of a private dinner. The entire controlled, polished facade of Davos was cracking right in front of everyone.
So what on earth explains all this bizarre behavior? It wasn't just about a few personalities clashing. No, the answer goes much deeper. It lies in the very structures that are supposed to hold our world together. And to understand the chaos, we need a theory.
And here is that theory. It's this idea called the Volatility Decade. The core concept is that for about 30 years, we've had this set of 10 structural frames that have basically been the shock absorbers for the global system. You know, things like stable alliances, credible institutions, a shared sense of facts. Well, the thesis is pretty simple. Those shock absorbers are now breaking down.
This analogy from the source material is just perfect. Think of these frames as the walls of a massive dam, holding back all this global instability. For decades, those walls were really thick, really strong. But now, those walls are getting thinner, and at the exact same time, the pressure of the water behind them is rising. So an event that might have caused a tiny ripple 10 years ago can now cause a massive crack in the wall.
And we can see exactly which of those frames were taking a beating. Tick-aligned stability, the basic idea that allies don't threaten each other. Well, that Greenland comment completely shattered it. Or how about institutional credibility, our trust in the people and organizations running the system? Yeah, that was about to take a direct hit too.
And look, this isn't just some abstract idea. It's actually a measurable system. The Volatility Decade thesis uses a tool called VISOR that literally scores the health of these 10 frames in real time. It's designed to spot the cracks before they become catastrophic breaks. And Davos was the ultimate test of this system.
Okay, so let's connect this theory back to what people actually saw and heard in Davos. How did these frames crack? Not in a computer model, but right there in front of everyone.
I mean, this is just stunning. You're looking at a quote from Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, the world's biggest asset manager. He's not trying to reassure anybody here. He is, for all intents and purposes, confessing. He's openly admitting that the institutional credibility frame is in tatters. This is one of the chief architects of the system saying the blueprints are failing.
And what happens when another frame, the information regime, breaks down? You get this. Absolute confusion. On the same day at the same conference, you have two of the world's top financial minds giving completely opposite advice. One says the world's biggest investors are quietly dumping U.S. bonds. The other says that doing that is a really dangerous bet. I mean, if the experts can't even agree on basic reality, how is anyone supposed to make a rational decision?
These right here, these are the human signals of a system under unbearable pressure. This isn't about policy anymore. This is about raw behavior. Sprinting CEOs, a central banker walking out, a former vice president audibly booing a cabinet secretary. And then Greenland mode became this dark inside joke for being completely paralyzed by chaos. These are the tells. They reveal the extreme pressure everyone was really feeling, but couldn't say out loud.
And all of this brings us to the core metaphor, the central idea of this entire event. Something fundamental shifted at Davos, and it was perfectly captured by one man and one really powerful story.
This is Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England, an ultimate insider, and he tells this story about a greengrocer in communist Czechoslovakia. Every day, the greengrocer puts a propaganda sign in his window that he doesn't believe in, just to go along. And Carney's point was just devastating. He said the whole rules-based international order had become that sign, a useful fiction, and it was time for everyone to stop pretending.
And here's why that analogy is so powerful. It works in steps. 1. A lie is kept alive because everyone just complies. They all put up the sign. 2. Everybody knows it's a lie, but no one wants to be the first one to take their sign down. But then, step 3, an authority figure stands up and gives everyone permission to stop pretending. And just like that, the whole system of collective belief collapses.
And this is the key. The audience, full of the world's most powerful people, they didn't gasp in shock. No, the reaction was relief. They gave him a standing ovation. Why? Because he wasn't telling them anything new. He was just saying the quiet part out loud, the thing they all privately believed but were afraid to say publicly. In that moment, the performance was over. The sign came down.
So what was the final verdict from this whole stress test? Well, it's not pretty. Institutional credibility, severely eroded. Alliance stability, critically stressed. The information regime, basically incoherent. Now, Davos didn't cause this damage, but it sure made it impossible for anyone to deny it any longer.
Okay, so the frames are cracked, the sign is down. Why does any of this high-level analysis matter to you personally? Because it fundamentally changes the rulebook for how we all have to navigate the future.
For decades, this was the absolute bedrock of investing, the 60-40 portfolio. 60% in stocks, 40% in bonds. It's built on a set of core assumptions about how the world works, assumptions that Davos 2026 just called directly into question.
These have been foundational beliefs for a generation. But what happens when U.S. government debt isn't seen as perfectly safe anymore? What happens when the world isn't just resetting to a stable normal, but is maybe entering a new, much more chaotic era? The old playbook just might not work anymore.
This really points to the new strategy that's required. The goal isn't to perfectly predict the future. It's to assess the health of the system in real time. You have to ask, is a frame just stressed, which could actually be an opportunity, or is it actively breaking, which is a sign of extreme danger? Being able to tell the difference is everything now.
Ultimately, we've moved past the point of debate here. The evidence is overwhelming. The frames that gave us decades of stability are degrading. So the real work now is for all of us to ask ourselves if our strategies, our businesses, our portfolios, are they actually ready for this new reality?
Because after Davos 2026, one thing is absolutely certain. The sign that once promised us a predictable, rules-based world has been taken down for good. The pleasant fiction is over. And that leaves every single one of us with one final urgent question. Are we truly ready for what comes next?